But it was a big idea, and I was delighted to be involved.
How important is the forum in enhancing regional dialogue and cooperation, especially in times like these of geopolitical turbulence?
It acknowledges that the geopolitical environment and the economic environment, so there'll be a lot of discussion. Any lots of confidence grows, and I think I want to talk about not only the reality of that.
What about the rules-based order, which is under threat at the moment? What's your I'm looking at it.
Well, look, China and New Zealand share the view that open markets and the rules-based order is critical for us all. I think all of us are very alarmed that the environment that we have been able to rely on for at least 40 years, if not longer, is very much diminished. China hosts APEC later this year. They will be looking to stabilise the region, strengthen the ways in which our rules-based systems, particularly in trade, can still allow our populations and our economies to flourish. But of course,
since it was launched an island-wide
or your favorite podcast platform. Become more eco-conscious and take action to protect our planet.
21 past the hour. The Israeli military says Iran has launched waves of missiles at Israel. The attacks triggered air raid sirens in parts of the country, including Tel Aviv. U.S. President Donald Trump postponed strikes on Iran's energy sites for 5 days, citing productive officials, but Tehran denies holding any negotiations with Washington. Jim Spellman has more.
Over the weekend, U.S. President Donald Trump threatened to attack Iran's power plants if the Strait of Hormuz wasn't opened by Monday. But now Trump says he's delaying those attacks by at least 5 days, posting on social media early Monday morning about previously unreported talks that were allegedly happening between the U.S. and Iran. He wrote in part, productive conversations regarding a complete period resolution of our hostilities in the Middle East were underway. He followed that up with comments later in the day. Listen.
We have had very, very strong talks. We'll see where they lead. We have major points of agreement. I would say almost all points of agreement. We'll at some point very, very soon meet. We're doing a 5-day period. We'll see how that goes. And if it goes well, we're going to end up with settling this. Otherwise, we just keep bombing our little hearts out.
Trump says his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff are handling the U.S. side of talks, but he didn't provide many details about these apparent talks, including who is involved in the Iranian side. And indeed, we're getting a different story from Iran. The Speaker of Iran's parliament posted in English on X, quote, "No negotiations have been held with the U.S. manipulate the financial and oil markets and escape the quagmire in which the U.S. and Israel are trapped." Iran's Fars News Service reported there is, quote, "no direct or indirect contact between Tehran and Washington."
That was Jim Spellman report. Proposed plane crash shortly after takeoff in the southern part of the country, killing over 60 people and injuring dozens. Michelle Begay has more from Bogota.
A terrible tragedy that occurred on Monday morning at 9:50 a.m. in the Puerto Leguizamo airport. More than 120 people were on board the aircraft. Officials are investigating.
Report that a Hercules liftoff
suffered a tragic accident while taking off from Putumayo as it was transporting troops. Military units are already at the scene of the incident. However, the exact number of victims and the causes of the crash have not yet been determined. All care protocols for the victims and their families have been activated, as well as a corresponding investigation.
Officials said 114 soldiers were passengers on that flight, and those who are in critical condition are being taken to nearby hospitals. They have to be airlifted and taken in other aircraft. The airport is strictly for military purposes. President Gustavo Petro spoke earlier in the day and said that this was a preventable tragedy, and he alluded to the fact that many of the military aircraft need to be renovated, and that his government, he said, has not been able to do so because of bureaucratic blockades. And so he made a call for the military to be able to modernize their fleet as soon as possible.
Reporting. 25th marks the International Day of Remembrance of the victims of slavery in the transatlantic slave trade. In Rio de Janeiro, a historic area known as Little Africa is preserving the memory of millions of enslaved Africans brought to Brazil. Li Shengping has more.
300 years ago, slave ships arrived at the Balongo Wharf, old port district. It was one of the largest entry points for enslaved Africans in the Americas. 28-year-old Lucas grew up nearby. He's a descendant of enslaved Africans, even after slavery was abolished in 1888. Inequality remained.
A escravização ainda continua nos nossos trabalhos, na nossa rotina.
Our people have suffered for a long time. Even today, we still face prejudice and social marginalization.
For years, African history was largely overlooked. That began to change in 2017 to teach this history in schools. Then, in 2011, the rediscovery of Balongo Wharf brought new attention to the past. Tour guide Lilian says people are now reclaiming identity.
A memória dessa população, the memory of this population now appears in books and in everyday life. We see it in places like the Frutos Nobis Institute, in museums, in summer schools, and community culture. More people are beginning to understand who they are. How this history matters.
Less than a kilometer away is the courthouse. It was founded after a homeowner uncovered the human remains during renovations in 1990s. The site was later identified as a burial ground for enslaved Africans. These Timorese turned her home into a memorial.
Você pode encontrar lá no when you discover 40,000 people housed in nearby land, many of them young people and children, you realize you cannot ignore it. If you did not who does? I have worked for this memory for more than 8 years. I'm proud of it.
Visitors from around the world come here. Many live in silence.
Personally, it's very sad for me. Very, very sad. I don't know if I have another word. Because when you think about view, it's cruel.
Nearby, the Museum of Black History and Culture of Rio tells a broader story, not just of suffering, but of resilience. Director Sinara says it's about reclaiming identity.
Da cultura e se saber da nossa história. Culture spaces like this allow us to organize ourselves again, intellectually, spiritually, and politically. This museum carries the responsibility of remembering what happened. But our history is not only about slavery, it is also a history of struggle, resistance, and resilience.
Education programs here focus on younger generations. Coordinator Neila says today's youth is increasingly engaged.
Young people today are more politically aware. They speak up more. They want their voices to be heard, and many of them are ready to take action.
From port to memorial to National Museum, Little Africa, is keeping this history alive. It is not only Brazil's story, but a shared human legacy.
That was Lei Shangping reporting. Contributions from Chile. Now Beijing down to 77, it will be cloudy and 25 on Wednesday. Shanghai will see a light rainfall overnight down to 10 degrees. That's followed up with overcast conditions in 19. Chongqing and Nanjing both getting a light rainfall, and the temperature is the same, a low 14, a high of 19. Last of the sea, Seoul, and it's down to 0, and that's followed by cloudy conditions in 14. Elsewhere in Asia, Islamabad will be overcast 14 overnight, then a light rainfall in 27. Vientiane's cloudy in 25, then 37. Overcast in 24 this evening, then cloudy in 36. In Africa, we'll be getting a light rainfall and a high of 24 degrees on Wednesday. That's a short wait for fire December. Chinese president inspected Shenyang area in Hebei province, calling for development of a business environment with international standards. For Asia and southern China says the wider Asian economy is showing strong resilience. And Israel says Iran's targeted the country with waves of missiles as fighting in the region continues. Shane Begum with you. Stay with us here on the Beijing Hour.
Listen up. Can you hear the heartbeat of our world? It's vibrant. From the silent strength of mountains to the icy whispers of glaciers, even the solid ground beneath our feet. Listen as a look around beats the heart of humanity. What is those wondered what's actually going on in Africa through the perspective of an African. How are things really going between China and Africa? What's the narrative of this relationship? Well, get a perspective with China-Africa Talk. Hear from African diplomats, entrepreneurs, academics, Chinese natives, and more. Get on our wavelength every week to find out what's real with China-Africa Talk. Find us on your favorite podcast. We'll see you there.
Examining the events that impact and shape China and the rest of the world. This is the Beijing Hour, 1 hour of news and information brought to you every weekday. Now here's your host,
Shane Begum with you on this Tuesday. Still to come. In business, oil prices have once again climbed above $100 a barrel. In sports, Yannick Sinner sets a new ATP record. In culture and entertainment, the Xinjiang region is celebrating a festival to mark the end of Ramadan. To contact us, you can email radio at cgtn.com or follow our X account at CGTN Radio. Now, to check the day's headlines, here's Wang Zahan.
Thank you, Sean. Chinese Vice President Han Zheng has reaffirmed China's commitment to expanding trade with Kenya and the wider African region. He attended the Business Forum in Nairobi on extending cooperation in agriculture, economy, and trade. Han said China is ready to support African countries in transforming resource advantages into development to advance modernization. Talks with the Kenyan Deputy President, Okoya is wanting to fully leverage the benefits of the zero-tariff policy to expand coal exports to China. Starting May the 1st, China will implement a zero-tariff policy for all products from 53 African countries with diplomatic ties to China. A report from the Boao Forum for Asia, which is currently underway in Hainan, says the foundations of Asian trade integration are continuing to strengthen. The report shows that intra-regional trade dependence rose from 56.3% in 2023 to 57.2% in 2024. The report highlights a growing trend among major economies in the region to orient trade more towards neighboring markets. Trade momentum is also picking up across the Asia.